Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Kyle's Corner. Today, I'm joined with my good friend Johanna. And you know what, Johanna? I realized like a couple minutes ago that this is the first time you've been on my channel, which seems very nuts to me because I feel like we've been in quite a few lives together, but it's always been on like other people's channels or your channels, whatever. So, thank you so much for coming on. And it's
Uh,
a pleasure always to talk to you. So, Johanna, like, if you want to quickly say who you are and what you cover, and then we'll get into our chat.
yeah, sure. So thank you, Kyle. I'm excited to be on your channel for once. I was so excited to be a guest here or be invited to be a guest here on Kyle's Corner. And so, yeah, my channel's name is Johanna Reads, and I talk about books on my channel. Surprise. I also have a why read discussion series where I ask people why they read and then go into further discussion from there. But yes, it's always a pleasure to get to have discussions here on Booktube.
I agree, and that "Why Read" is one of my favorite like recurring segments on BookTube. So I'm really glad that you started that. And also, Kevin, I just have to say, Joanna was late. I was not late. She's pulling from her Allen influence,
I
and
wasn't late. I was 1 minute early. Well, okay, that's kind of
that
pushing
is
it.
true. That is true. She was basically on time. Hey Ryan, how's it going? Matt's here too. We have Laura, and she who does not believe that you were late. So you have an ally on that, and
Aw,
we have Evie,
thank
of
you,
course.
Laura.
Mitch is skipping his kids' baseball games, which is not true, but love you, Mitch. My first question for you is a bit of a role reversal. I'm sure through the course of most of the episodes I've watched of Why Reads, I have seen you answer this question, but I don't remember you ever actually physically answering it. So why do you read, Joanna?
Why do I read? Hmm. I wish I had a good answer for that. And the reason I should preface this by saying that the reason I created that show and the reason I created that question is because I think it's an ongoing question. I don't think that you necessarily have
Hmm.
to have one answer all the time. But right now, I think I am reading to feel immersed in a world, to enjoy a different atmosphere, characters, and to explore different themes. That's something that I love in books. And usually that the theme exploration, I know I talk a lot on my channel about how I feel like I gravitate towards books that are thematic. And what I mean by that is I feel like themes are the universal aspects of a story, but at the same time as they're sometimes the universal aspects of the story speaking to the broader human condition, they're also experienced in such a personal way, for
Hmm.
each individual. And so I love that macro and micro exploration in stories where you can look at how this theme can apply universally to a lot of people, but also just feel it very intimately and personally. And so that's why I read. And so I think that right now that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like I want to have this very specific feeling when I'm reading because it's the fall season. And right now I'm reading Sailing to Serendium. And I don't know if people would consider this a fall read, but for me, it is hitting that mark. It is making me
I
feel
would understand why it's a fall read. How far into the book are you right now?
I'm not terribly far. I'm in chapter
Hmm.
3.
There's a specific set of scenes that feel very fall-like to me. So I would consider that a fall read. I totally get it, and that is an
Mhm.
excellent answer, Joanna, as always. One of the things I love about BookTube is getting to view so many different people's perspectives and the way that they engage with a book. Because I always like listening to you talk about a book, because usually you don't really like there's some people who they're like, I really like this experience, this book, and I thought the emotions of this were great, blah 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 blah, which is also great, but you always take that time to take that thematic exploration and how that ties into your experience. And I just always think that it's so great to hear you talk about that because a lot of times I don't think about it while I'm reading, and I maybe do after the fact. But hearing people like you and Philip and even Jimmy's also very good at it. I don't know why I said even Jimmy, like he shouldn't be, but Jimmy thinks that that's why I was like that. If Jimmy's watching this, it's because Jimmy always thinks that he's not, but he is very good at it. Um, and I then that makes me appreciate the themes of something more. And so, yeah, I just really love that you talk about the books the way that you do. And also, people are being very funny in the comments. So if I start laughing, that is why. Uh, we have Kev
Yes.
being a troll out here.
Hello, everybody. So glad to see all the fun friends in the chat. Yeah, I think that that's something like you said that's very special about our community because we do have these books that speak broadly to us. especially in this corner of booktube that we're in, a lot of us love Guy Gabriel Kay, for example, or love certain authors, but we all have a different personal experience with those books. And so it's just nice to look at that exploration through different channels.
Yeah. Are you
Just-
liking Sailing to Strontium so
I'm
far? Like,
loving it.
I know that you're not that far, but yeah, that book is incredible, and I'm so happy that you and Josh are finally reading that book because I think you guys, that series is just gonna be a slam dunk. I thought about rereading it with you guys, but I'm a little too much behind. But
Yeah.
do you like Song for Our Bone the most out of the Guy Gabriel Kay you've read, right?
So far, yes. That one spoke to me personally because I love, obviously, the troubadour history part of it. But yes, I am enjoying Sailing to Strontium. It was a little bit of a slow start for me. The prologue has so much detail and so much exposition in it. So it took a lot of time for me to I read that part, I think, a little bit more slowly than most people, trying to absorb everything that
It's
was
a
going
lot of
on.
information.
It's a
Yeah,
lot. There's a lot of
yeah,
information thrown at you.
and
So
a
I
lot
didn't
of it
really.
isn't directly relevant. Like, it's more like backdrop.
Mm.
So
Oh,
yeah,
that's good to know. Yeah, I was wondering about that, like how much of it comes into play, but a lot
like
is thrown at you. Yeah.
it yeah, like, it's all relevant, like, it's not like it's just extraneous detail, but I would say for the most part, it's, like, the main how the person who is the focus of it gets to where they are. I'm trying to remain vague. And then, there's, like, a few hidden backdrop things that, like, in hindsight, you're like, "Oh, I guess that was important," but it's not gonna be like all of those people are gonna be like, you're not gonna be, pulled away for not remembering everything in the prologue. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good because
I'm not
go
gonna
ahead.
highlight Laura's, comment for that specific reason just in case, but that sounds like a very awesome find, Laura. And, Song for Our Bone seems to be a recommended starting point now that a bunch of people are reading it, but for years, it was, like, maybe the second least talked about Guy Gabriel Kay book that I had heard of. Like, it was, like, Isabel, and then maybe, like, Children of Earth and Sky, and then Song for Our Bone. I just feel like nobody talked about, and then now people are really liking it. And,
Yes.
I read the prologue 2 months ago. I have not continued, just because I always have, like, so many things that I have to read, and then I'm like, "Well, I don't have to read Song for Our Bone yet," but I'm waiting until the mood really strikes me.
That's a good idea, and with the Song for Our Bone, I would say the prologue is kinda similar as Sailing to Sarantium in the sense that it takes place so much earlier before the story actually starts, but at the same time, I would say the names are pretty important, so what I did when I read A Song for Our Bone was I actually wrote down the character names in the prologue and, the relationships, who they were, and I felt like it was smooth sailing after that, but I remember it was a lot to take in for that book as well, but
That's
I
interesting.
did
Is that
love.
something that you have to do a lot? Like, did you do that with Malazan or R. Scott Baker or anything like that?
Yeah, actually I did. With Malazan, yeah, the prologues are pretty intense in that series, as you probably know with what you've read so far.
Mhm.
I I don't know that I took the most detailed notes about the prologues in Malazan,
Oh, I don't
but
mean in prologues in general, just mean, like, while you're moving through book to keep track of the characters. Like, do you find you have to normally do that, or is it
oh,
just more of
that,
a
yes. Okay, that's a good question. It just depends on the book. With Baker, it was pretty easy because it's a pretty contained cast of characters. With Malazan, it's a lot of characters, so I
it's
don't know
so
that I
funny.
really took the time. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's so funny that I'm the exact opposite because Malazan, I feel like I keep the characters straight pretty well. But The Darkness That Comes Before, those names will not stick in my brain. Kellis is the like I so it's been like 6 months since I've read The Darkness That Comes Before, which is a book that you recommended to me, and I'm very glad you did because I really liked it and I really want to read The Warrior Prophet. But
Mhm.
I can only remember the name Kellis. Like, that's the only name that I remember. They just wouldn't stick in my head. But I did really like the book, but I would just have to, like, that meme where people are like went to that's me with The Darkness That Comes Before. They just would not stay in my brain.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's actually even a cast list at the back of the book, so I don't know if that would be
Yes.
helpful to look at
Yeah,
that.
I found that out after I read the book, which is funny. So I will be
Mm.
utilizing that for the second book.
Well, they will stick with you because it's pretty much following the same characters book per book for the most part.
Good.
So, yeah, you have Nair and Esmenet, Kellis,
Oh, I do remember
Akamian.
Esmonet. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
but that name sounds good to me. It's like Esmonet, like
Esmenet or Esme, and then
yeah.
Akamian or Akka is what they call him sometimes, and then there's
How far
Serway.
how far into that series are you?
So I finished the trilogy, and then I started the quartet following the trilogy. So the second Apocalypse is 2 series. It's a
Mhm.
trilogy, the Prince of Nothing trilogy, and then there's the second series that follows the first trilogy. So you have to read the Prince of Nothing trilogy first. So I'm reading Aspect Emperor right now alongside Philip,
Right.
and we have both finished the first 2 books. So that's The Judging Eye and The White Lick Warrior. And then so next we have to read I have 'em right here. I have to read The Great Ordeal. It's a chunker too. And
Yeah, they get big.
The Unholy Consult. And the thing about this book is kind of like the third book in the series. Check this out. Like this whole entire section. Oh man, it's long. Dang. Okay, sorry, one sec. So
No
this
worries.
whole entire back section of the book, this huge chunk of the book, appendix.
Oh, that's
Appendix.
kind of like I kinda like that because then I feel like I'm actually closer to the end than I've been feeling the whole time.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, even when I reread A Song of Ice and Fire, I'm like, "Oh, there's so much book left," and then I'm like, "Wait a second, a lot of that is appendix," so
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
so it's
nice.
a lot of the names, the places, there's a whole glossary in the back. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of detail to Baker's World, but I love it. I love that series so much. Love his writing. Enjoying it so much.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like so, in 2022, you were one of the booktubers who gave me a list of books to read, and the Darkness that comes before was the one that you recommended for me, and it was like December, and I had to finish like 4 of the books, and so I rushed through them all, which is never good. But I did really like the
Mhm.
book, but at the time I read it in such a concentrated space, like I think I mostly listened to it over the course of like 3 or 4 days that I was like, yeah, the book was good. And then, but then, like over time, I've just been like thinking about it more. I'm like, I really want to get back to that. I cannot believe that I haven't read it, continued on since December. So I really hope this is the month. But I keep saying that. Another thing is Midnight Tides. I feel like every stream I have to talk about how I'm going to start Midnight Tides right away, and I don't start it. So
Yeah, well, you have to go by what feels right for you. I mean, those are heavy
yeah,
books. Those are books that you do have to have, like, the mental bandwidth and the emotional bandwidth to process. So, I think, just
S-
honor whatever time feels right for you.
yeah. Sometimes it's honestly, it has nothing to do with mental. It's just like I don't want to hold a big book. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah.
I'm just like, "Oh, man," like, like, "Look at this book, it's so nice and small," and I'm like, or Midnight Tides is 4 times the size, like, sometimes it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, those
What are
books are
you
so heavy.
what is your thoughts on Midnight Tides, like,
I
in the
love
course of the
Midnight
series?
Times.
Oh,
Loved
good, you
it.
want
That's actually the only book in the 10-book series I've reread. So I reread it via audio last year, and I really enjoyed the reread experience, but, I mean, I loved it. I love that book because I feel like it introduces some of my favorite characters in the series, for one. Secondly, I just
Teal and Bug are the ones
yeah, I
people always
love
talk
Hole
about?
and
Yeah.
Bug and Shirk, and yeah, there's so many great Saren Pedek, I think, is introduced in that book. So many excellent characters in that book. And plus, I know a lot of people talk about this with Memories of Ice and other books in the series about how it feels Shakespearean, but I think you do get that Shakespearean tragic element in that story. Excellent exploration of brotherhood in that story. I think it's just a powerful, powerful book. You also learn some more stuff about Warrens and magic and healing in that story as well.
Oh, that's always appreciated. Although,
Mhm.
like, I know some people when they're starting Malazan, they talk about, they're like, "Oh, no, I don't know what a Warren is," and I've just, like,
Mhm.
never really concerned myself with it. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess it depends on the type of reader you are where, like, knowing that will be really important to you and, like, how they work, but I'm just like, "Okay, this Warren, they did a thing, and now Quick Ben's doing this." So, like, I don't know, it never slows me down, but it would be nice to, I guess, know a little bit more about them.
It clearly doesn't seem to bother me because I still couldn't tell you exactly how a horn works, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
finished the series, so, yeah, I don't think that it's a requirement, but, yes, some people I think that it depends on the type of reader you are for sure, like you said. Like, some people, they can't let that go, they have to know how everything works. I'm not one of
Yeah.
those type of readers apparently, so it worked fine for
Yeah, I
me.
don't know. I think the booktube conversation around Malazan can sometimes just be a little self-defeating for someone who has because once you're already in it, then you already know what your opinions are. But a lot of people hear people talk about it and then they start reading. Like I had a friend who read Dead House Gates and they were reading it at the same time as me. And they were like, I don't understand anything that's going on in this book. Like I feel like I'm stupid, like I don't know what's going on. And I buddy read Dead House Gates with Bookborn, but I'm not talking about Bookborn. This is somebody else who I'm not going to name. And I was like, well, what do you think is going on? And they like listed a bunch of stuff that is exactly what I thought was going on too. But I didn't feel like I was stupid and my head was over water or anything like that. I was like, oh, that's exactly what, like, we're picking up on the same stuff. But they felt like they were just in over their head and that like they were stupid because they weren't making more connections. And meanwhile, I was just like, yeah, like eventually these things will make sense. And that is not to say that they were reading it wrong or anything like that. It's just that
No.
like I think that they went into it expecting that they had to like know every little tiny thing, and that
Yes,
just
that's
sucks. That's
yeah.
just the dangers of conversations sometimes.
That's interesting. I could see that being the case. I could totally understand that experience though, because there are
Mhm.
so many parts and you do get it, but then you might not know the why. Like, why is this happening? Where is it going? And so you get that eventually, but you kind of have to like roll with it. And
Mhm.
that's the
Yeah.
challenging thing.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, like it's a good series. I hope it becomes a favorite by the time I finish, but
Yeah.
if
I
not,
think
that's okay.
also another thing that's challenging about Malazan and maybe what adds to people's confusion or the complexity idea in about the series is that there are so many weird magical things that happen that feel so it's just so rock and roll or something. It's just so weird. It's just so weird that sometimes I would read something and it's kind of like you and your friend where it's like, yeah, we read the same thing. I would read a certain section and I would wonder, "Wait, did that actually happen or did I dream that?" Like, I'd almost doubt myself because it was so
Yeah.
weird, and so I can understand that being the case. But yeah, there are just weird things that happen in the series,
I
and you just
totally
never
agree,
get
and
it.
this is not related literally at all, but you said rock and roll, and it reminds me that I have to make fun of you for this. You said something the other day that was so funny to me. You posted in the Discord. I didn't say anything in the Discord because I didn't want to come across like it's easier to know that I'm joking when I'm talking in person. But you were just like, "Oh yeah, I know that nobody else here really knows who Motley Crue are, but I really like Motley Crue." And you posted a Motley Crue video, and I was like, "That's so
I
funny
did
that you
not
think
do
that
that.
nobody." Is that
I don't
wasn't
think that
you?
was me,
I think
no.
that was you. I'm gonna go find it later, but okay, if it wasn't you,
I did
then
not
but
post
I'm
a
pretty
Motley
sure it
Crue
was.
video. No. I think what you're referring to is I was talking to Brian of Belltube, who's here in the chat, and he posted his, favorite Motley Crue, what was it? I'm sorry, Brian, I'm blanking on the name, like his favorite Motley Crue's a fantasy, and I was joking with him because he posted every time he posted that, he had a picture of the band Motley Crue, and so I was like, "Ha ha ha," like, "I think I knew what Motley Crue was," like, "I think I'm the only one who knew what Motley Crue was."
Oh,
But I unless I
ah,
did say something in the Discord,
mm.
I don't remember that
Maybe
though.
you were trying to make a joke and it didn't come off as a joke, but that's okay. I just thought it was very funny that you just were like, "Oh, all these like people here don't know who Motley Crue is," but never mind
Ah,
then.
oh, because I did
Uh,
say something like that on Brian's
yeah,
channel, but I don't think I was ever a fan of that band, but I do remember them.
you're not a fan of Motley Crue? How dare you?
Oops.
You're more of a like classical person, huh? Because you're like a classically trained. What instrument do you play, or do you play or you sing?
I'm a singer, and
Okay.
I would say that my musical taste ranges between classical music for sure. I think that's partly why Josh Red Fury Books and I connected so strongly with the Song for Our Bone because we have that
Right, yeah, that
that
makes sense.
music history background. But also I love like 90s alternative rock. Um, I don't know. I like a variety of things, I think. That would probably be my area. I like 90s grunge, alternative rock, and
Yeah, I like a
Pink
lot of that
Floyd,
stuff too.
that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, Pink Floyd is
Mhm.
fantastic. I have a Pink Floyd shirt that I wear all the time.
Yeah.
And you should not watch The Dirt because it's not a good movie. That's why, Kev. So one question I had for you is, what is the first book that you can remember that made you really fall in love with reading? Like something where you decided this is going to be like a hobby that you really pursue.
It was a book when I was 9 or 10 years old. I think I was 9 years old, and it was called Summer of Fear by an author called Lois Duncan. It's a very old book now. It was old when I picked it up, but it was in my elementary school library, and my cousin, who I very much looked up to, was reading the book, and I saw her reading it and I saw her enjoying it, and I was immediately intrigued by the cover because it was a YA horror book, but it had a campy horror cover on it, and so I was immediately intrigued because I really loved horror when I was a kid, like, I loved horror movies, and I always wanted to try to scare myself, so I picked up
This is
that
back
book.
when you were a rebel, right? You were, like, getting
Yeah.
hit by cars and stuff? Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, I was 9 years old, but yeah. So I picked up the book and I instantly loved it. And so I picked up every book I could find by Lois Duncan at the time, and then that transitioned to R.L. Stine, and, yeah, so that was when I knew I was in love with reading.
Nice. Do you still like
Yeah.
horror a lot? Like, I know you read some Stephen King, but otherwise you don't really touch as much horror, it seems like?
I don't. I'm reading it right now. I'm not very far into that book. I need to make more progress, but I've been devoting more time to Sailing to Sarantium. But I'm not much of a horror reader. No, oddly. I'm trying
Do
to
you have
think.
a guess as to why that is?
I don't. I mean, I know I loved it when I was a kid, and then
Yeah,
now I don't know,
interesting.
I don't have anything against it. I really
Right,
enjoyed The
right.
Only Good Indians by, Stephen Graham Jones. I love that book, and I need to read more by that author because I really enjoyed his writing style. But I don't know why, it's just never been
Yeah,
a
sometimes you
genre
just
that.
you just gravitate to something different, but I do always find it interesting, like, how tastes change over time, and sometimes
Mhm.
there's more of a concrete reason, and then sometimes you just, like, for whatever reason, you stop picking up the thing. I recently went and listened to I'm not even gonna say the song on this, but I went recently and listened to, like, an old rap song that, like, I used to like, in my head, I was like, "This is a song I really like," and then I listened to it, I'm like, "Oh, no, I have changed quite a bit. I don't like this song at all." So
That
so,
happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, Kev just, hated this book. You know what? I will tell you I also didn't like this book for the same reason that Kevin didn't, which is the ending is or I didn't even get to the ending. The middle of the book I thought was goofy, but I know what the ending is, and I think the ending was also goofy. But I'm glad you
Interesting.
liked it, Joanna.
Yeah, I wonder what it was you were talking about.
Uh, basketball.
Anyway.
I'm talking about basketball specifically.
Basketball. Oh gosh, I don't remember anything about that just shows how bad my memory is. I mean, I remember something with newspaper clippings in a weird structure and at the sweat camp. I don't know. My mind's all over the place when
Interesting.
it comes to remembering
I
details
didn't
about
finish the book, so
basketball.
I didn't know about that scene until somebody told me about it, but, yeah, I do wanna pick up his new, I'm Not a Serial Killer, I think is his newest one. Are you
Yes.
interested in
Yeah, that
trying
sounds
more
good.
Stephen Graham Jones?
Yeah, that does sound good. And Josh, we were just talking about you because we were talking about Sailing to Sarantium, how we're reading that right now. So I've been on the Guy Gabriel K hype train alongside Josh, and I think that he and I are planning to complete that duology this month. He jumped ahead of me. He's already finished with Sailing to Sarantium, and he loved it. So that's a pretty good sign that I think I'm going to
Yes, if
enjoy it
you
as well.
love Sailing to Sarantium, I only know of one person who loves Sailing to Sarantium and didn't love Lord of Emperors, and they're wrong, so
Wow.
I have high I mean, Lord of Emperors, the more I think about that, I think that's, like, in my top 5 favorite books of all time. I really like that book. I am
Yeah.
just going to look I think there's a new I have on my, list here. Yeah, no, Edie, I am thinking of I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. Came out this year. That's on my hold list at the library. That's the one that I'm gonna read next from him.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Josh is starting Lord of Emperors tomorrow, which is very exciting. You've been reading a lot of sci-fi lately, though. Do you think you're like transitioning back into more fantasy spheres now? You had your little sci-fi phase, or do you think that it's going to continue on? Because there was a while there where I feel like every book you were picking up was more sci-fi leaning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that an intentional choice?
A little bit, yeah. I made a sci-fi TBR, at the end of last year because I picked up what was it? I picked up Babel 17 by Samuel Delany, and then Lord of Light by, Zelazny, and I also picked up Tenant Leaves, Electric Forest. There were several sci-fi books I picked up towards the end of last year that made me think I'm missing out. I love sci-fi. Dune is one of my favorite books ever, so I don't know why I'm not reading more sci-fi because there are so many sci-fi books I love, and so I made a short TBR this year of 5 sci-fi books I'm wanting to read, and then I read them, and it somehow led me to read a few more sci-fi books. And the nice thing about the sci-fi books is that they're at least the ones I've been reading have been standalones, and so they've been just nice to
And they're
insert
usually
between all
short.
these
Yeah,
series.
like there's
And they're
so many
usually short.
shorter sci-fi books. I just read Born by Jeff Vandermeer. Is that one of the books you buddy read with Murphy? Did you read that one?
No, we didn't buddy read that one, but I know that she's a huge fan of that series or of that author.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
loved Born. I read the whole book
Oh.
yesterday. I thought
Wow.
it was very
Nice.
good, and,
Cool.
it it gives me renewed vigor to retry Annihilation
Hmm.
because I didn't like Annihilation when I read it the
Oh,
first time, but it's very short, and I think I was maybe expecting it to be more like the movie, which I love, and it wasn't. So I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll reread it someday. But the fact that I liked Bourne so much means that I will probably reread it quite soon. Have you read any Jeff Vandermeer?
I haven't read any Jeff Vandermeer yet because I think all the sci-fi I've been reading this year, with the exception of Hyperion, have been standalone sci-fi books. And I read Hyperion thanks
Gotcha.
to Matt, our co-owner in the Discord. So I have not read. Yeah, I've only been reading standalones. Like I think you read Roadside Picnic, which is one I also read earlier this year.
Yes, I did read Roadside Picnic, which I did not really like, but I love the concept of it. I think it's
Yes, me
such a
too.
good concept.
Yes.
Um, I did not like the point of view we were covering, and I didn't really like what the individual story elements were doing, and the writing style kind of bothered me. Like that wasn't the biggest deal, but it just kind of felt awkward to me. Maybe that's a translation issue. Um, but I wish we could get the exact same concept, but just like a different part of that concept. You know what I mean? Because I thought it was brilliant.
I feel the same way about that book. I love the
Yeah.
concept of that book, and I love the conversations it had. I love the take on first contact, but there was something about the writing that I struggled with, and I also wondered if it was a translation issue. And I also did not like the character we followed. He was a hard person. He wasn't really meant to be a likable character, which is
Yeah, I
fine.
disliked him as a person, but I also disliked him as the point of view, which I feel
Mhm.
is a different concept. Like I follow plenty of people. Like I mean, Jamie Lannister is
Yes,
not the
best
best person,
character
but I
ever.
love following him. And this guy, I
Mhm.
was just like, not only did I think his decision making was bad, I also was just like, ugh, like I don't want to be following you. So it
That's a
kind of
good
just
point because, like, the most interesting part of that entire book, like, chapter 3, he's not in that part.
yes, that's so
The
true.
most
That was the
interesting
best part of the book to
conversation.
me. Yeah,
Yes.
no, I totally agree. Have you heard of Two Like the Lightning, the Terra Ignata series by Ada
Yes,
Palmer?
I have
Yeah,
because of
I
Jade. Mhm.
yes, I think very strongly that you will like it.
Oh,
Um, but I'm not going to talk about it at all because it's one of the books on my uh like Jake and Ben did a TBR for me, and Jake chose this book for me, and I have to reveal my score for it. So I can't give any hints as to whether or not I liked it. But anybody who knows me knows that I will recommend books that I don't like to people if I do genuinely think they would like it. So regardless of what I think of it, I totally think you should pick this book up. I think you would find a lot to enjoy in it.
is it part of a series? Is Terragnata a series
It's
or
4 books, yes. Um, and I'm told the second book is just like extremely hype. Like I think Jake can correct me if he's changed his mind, but at the time when he read the second book, he said it might be his new favorite sci-fi novel of all time. So I don't know if he's
Wow.
backed down on that or not, but he was extremely high on the second book.
That's good to know. Gosh, this is the hard part because like I said, I think I've been reading a lot of sci-fi because they've been standalones, they've been shorter.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard because now I feel like, oh, I really want to read the Jeff Vandermeer series. I want to continue with Hyperion. I want to read The Three Body Problem or Remembrance of Earth's Past. I want to read Sun Eater. Now this
Yeah, I
series as
mean,
well. Ugh,
yeah,
so many.
I don't know. Like, I think you will like the Annihilation. Like the Southern Reach trilogy is the one you're talking about. I think you will like it. It's hard for me to know because it's so esoteric, and like the second and third books are way less rated well than the first book.
Okay.
So I don't know why that is. Um, but yeah, those are very short, mercifully. Like I had a bind up of all three before I got rid of it, and the whole bind up was like 800 pages. So
Oh,
like
wow.
you could read that whole trilogy pretty easily.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't describe the second book as super hype as in like epic, but it still might be my favorite sci-fi novel, or maybe perhaps The Stars. Perhaps The Stars is the last book in that series. So it seems like Jake is quite a big fan.
Dang. Okay. I will consider it. Most people just
I
read
know there's
Annihilation.
so much to read.
I still need to read that too, and I do wanna read it because I really love the first 3 Dune books. I love Dune the most out of Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune, but I love those 3 books. The only reason I haven't continued on yet is because I felt like I got a complete arc with those 3 books, And so I've always felt like, oh, if I read God Emperor of Dune, it's because I just want the wormy weirdness. I
Yeah.
just want to satisfy that wormy
I
weirdness
think this will
itch.
be the last one that I read is God Emperor. I don't think I'm gonna
For
go past
sure.
that one. I really
Me
wanna
too.
reread Dune because I read
Mm,
Dune pretty early on into my, like, "Hey, I actually like fantasy and sci-fi," journey,
mhm.
and I didn't like it very much at all. Like, and then finished it on audio, and then I liked it a bit more. And then I watched both of the movies, and now I understand all the concepts and like what the movies or what the story is trying to do, and I can visualize a lot more of it, and I know all the characters. And so I really, really want to reread Dune and then continue on. Like, I don't want to just go on to Dune Messiah. And I have a feeling that the second time is going to be the charm, and I'm going to really like it the second time that I read it.
I think so. I hope so. I've read it twice and I loved it both times, but I can understand why somebody wouldn't love it as much, for
Have you
sure.
read any Lois McMaster Bujold yet? I can't
Not
remember.
yet. She is one of the authors I really wanna get to. I need to make a list for next year. I need to make a list for next year.
Yeah, I've read the first chapter of Curse of the Challeon because I was going to read that in
Mhm.
May, and then I just put it down. But I really liked the first chapter. I thought it was good. And then I read the first of the Vorgosigan saga, and I really liked it.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of like pulpy sci-fi, but in a way that it's elevated beyond what the schlock of that genre would be, if that makes sense. Like it's just like an adventure story, but the way that she's so good at characterization, even in that first novel, that it kind of adds an extra layer to all of the stuff. But I mean, I've heard that once you actually get into the series, the depth of it becomes quite deep, and so hopefully, I really like that.
It's a
Uh,
long series though, isn't it?
yeah, I don't even know how many books it is. It's at least like 17. It's a lot.
Oh, I don't think I could do it. I wanna read at least the first book
What's the
though.
what's the longest book that you've or sorry, the longest series that you read? Is it Malazan? Like, not in terms of page count, but in terms of number of books.
I think it's I think it's, Malazan. I think it is.
Yeah.
How long is the Witcher series? I don't even know. I have
Uh,
read all of those books though,
Fa 6? I think it's 6.
plus the
It's
short
weird
story
because there's,
collection.
like, short stories. I don't remember exactly, but,
Yeah.
I stopped after the 3rd because those books aren't good, so
I have very mixed feelings about the story.
Yeah.
Um, I love the characters. The characters I still think about to this day as standouts, but the series as a whole just wasn't a favorite. Yet
Yeah, you
7
said
is
in
a
a video recently that you really liked Yennefer, and I found
I
that very
did. Yeah.
surprising because I don't at all, but that's why reading is so interesting.
Yeah, I found it
Um,
fascinating. Yeah.
but
Really interesting character.
I do really like Ciri, and I think the reason I don't like Yennefer
Mhm.
is because all of the time that we're around Yennefer, it's just Geralt being like, "Oh, yeah, like, I need to go sleep with Yennefer," or, "Oh, yeah, like, Yennefer will do this for me." Like, I think it's just maybe because it's filtered through a lot of Geralt's perspective that I didn't really feel any attachment to her as, like, a strong character.
I didn't feel like they were together that much throughout the series. I don't know if
I
my
did not
memory
read
is
very much
accurate
of the
about that.
series,
Yeah, see,
so
because in
you
the
read a lot
series,
more than me. Because in
so
the
in
short stories she would have had to have been always with Geralt, and then in the first book, Blood of Elves, she's mostly with Ciri, and I had major problems with that whole section, and then I DNF'd after book 2. So maybe later on in the series, that's not what happens.
yeah, so, like, my interpretation of that is, you know how you have the found family trope in fantasy, but in the Witcher series, it's a found family that's supposed to function kind of like a real family. So, like, Yennefer being the mom, Geralt being the dad, and then Ciri being the child, but I never felt like they I never felt like I got enough of all 3 on the page together in that series, and I kept wanting that as a reader. So that
I,
was
totally agree with that. I I don't like the way that, the author sexualized Ciri. That was my
oh,
number 1 biggest problem. But then I also, like, felt like the series always had a focus problem where, like, anything that was happening, I'm like, "There's something else that's more interesting happening over here." Like, it just felt like the spotlight was always not where I wanted it to be, and there's, like, interesting concepts, and, like, I really like Geralt and Ciri, but it just never really blended together. And then the thing that happens at the end of Ship of Destiny, which, Ryan also really hated, is what made me I was like, quit the series. I'm like, "Alright, I think I'm done here."
see, I read
But,
all those books back to back to back to back to back, so my memory is blurred about what happened in which book, But even doing that, even reading the whole series back to back to back, I just felt like there was something disjointed about it. It just didn't quite flow. Even though I liked the themes it was going for, and I loved the characters, and I still remember having certain character moments that I loved, like the banter. I love that Geralt is portrayed as this, I don't know, this kinda gruff kinda guy, and Dandelion balances him out really well. I know we have
That's
that
true. Yeah.
similar kinda combination in fantasy a lot of times, where you have the jovial counterpoint to the more, like, gruff person, but I love that other characters didn't let him get away with taking himself too seriously. I loved that banter, that happens throughout the series. Like, I think it was well done in some ways. Like I said, the characters stood out. They stayed with me, but the story did not. The story just, it just didn't
Yeah.
quite have enough focus for me for some reason. Maybe it's because I was earlier on in my fantasy journey when I read it, but that, yeah, I did have some challenges with it.
I crap on The Witcher all the time, just kind of because it's become a meme. But one thing I do think that he's consistently good at, in all of the, even the books I didn't like, he's really good at dialogue.
Yes.
Um, I think that is his strongest attribute. And specifically, Geralt and Dandelion's dialogue would be the two that I would point out as being the most consistently very well done. So I agree with you on that. I
Mhm.
just wish the rest of it. Glenn Cook also writes very good banter. Have you read any Glenn Cook?
Not yet, no. I know Evie loves it, and so that's definitely been, that's another series I think I
This
might
is for
wanna.
sure a dark horse choice for Evie, though. I would not have expected her to love this series
Oh,
as much as she
I know.
does.
Yeah. Surprised me
Yeah.
as well. Surprised me as well. So, yeah, because we were talking, I think Evie was on Laura's channel the other night, and we were trying to decide. Laura was asking me in the chat if she thinks that Evie would like Warlord Chronicle, and I was like, "I don't know," because
Mm.
Evie loved Black Company, but I wouldn't have normally thought she'd love Black Company. I don't know.
I
Maybe.
think I think she would really struggle through the part of Winter King that everyone struggles through, and Evie is very feel in the moment. So I think even if we collectively, me, you, Alan, Jimmy, all of the people that she trusts were like, the first 150 pages of Winter King are kind of rough and confusing and just a list of names. Even knowing that, I think when she got into reading it, by the time she got out of that, she'd already have disconnected from the story. And I think
Oh.
it would be really hard to win her back. That's what my guess would be.
But she loves Gormenghast, and I feel like that's some of the most difficult fantasy of all time. I haven't
I
read
haven't
it.
read it to know whether or not it's similar, but I feel like it's difficult in the way that it's a lot of descriptions and tepid pacing, which I think is a different problem with Winter King, where Winter King is just like, and then the son of
Yeah.
Flididabla went to the Flididabli and he flooded and I'm like, what is happening? Like without the audiobook, I would have just been absolutely lost as to all the things that are happening at the beginning there.
Yes.
But then once you get like the foundations, that series just goes. So
Yeah. Yeah. The audiobooks, I did immersion read that series, and I highly recommend that if people, can enjoy audiobooks for sure.
um we have an off-topic question, but interesting nonetheless. What is your guys' favorite movie and favorite show, respectively? Joanna, I'll let you go first, unless you need a minute to think about it.
Yeah. So I it's funny because right before we went live, you were telling me that you and your wife are watching Dark. Is that Dark
Yes.
on Netflix?
Yes.
Because that's my favorite show.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
Yes, I love that
I so
show.
I started it like maybe 6 months ago, and I got to the fifth episode, and I was just like, "Oh, my wife is gonna want to watch this." Like we you get to a reveal at the end of episode 5, and I was like, "Oh, I have to stop here." And I'm like, she's like her one of the shows that she's the most crazy about is Stranger Things, and then we just watched which is like a horror series set in like a small town that nobody can leave, and there's like a bunch of mysteries going on. And I was just like, "Oh, this is for sure like my wife coded." So then I had to wait until we were like done all the things we were watching, and the whole time I've been like, "Man, I really want to get back to Dark," but we restarted Dark, and now we're on like episode 8 of the first season, and so we're like really in the thick of it. And so she was like, yeah, I was just telling Joanna before we started that my wife was like, how long is your live stream, because like we gotta watch more of it before bed. So
Yes. Oh, I love that. It's funny because I think I forced my husband to watch that show, but it's only 3 seasons. It
yeah,
wraps
it's
up
short.
perfectly in 3 seasons, in my opinion. You're gonna have to let me know your final thoughts. Please, please, please let me know your final thoughts.
I'll update
Tag
in the
me.
Discord.
Tag me in the Discord. Yes, let me know because I adore that show. I love time travel, And that show is just like if you love time travel, if you love complex sci-fi, if you can keep up because it has a huge cast of characters and multiple timelines, I think it's the payoff is so worth it. I was so emotional over that show. I loved it so much.
Yeah, I'm
What about
expecting to
you?
really like it.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite show of all time is The Wire. I literally got a tattoo based on The Wire the other day.
Wow.
So, I think everybody should watch it. I think especially book readers. Like, so my whole life, I've liked The Wire since I was a teenager, and I was like, "Is this the best show I've ever watched?" And then every time I rewatch it, I'm like, "Yes, yes, it is." But getting people to watch it in my real life has been a huge struggle because it's usually not on a streaming service that people have, and it sounds boring to pitch, and I'm the only one pitching it to people. Whereas, like people, you'll ask a bunch of people for recommendations, and they'll just recommend whatever's popular on Netflix right now. So if eight casuals recommend something, they're not going to listen to me to watch the best show of all time. Uh, so for the longest time, nobody would watch The Wire, and then like 5 or 6 years later, I'd have a friend be like, "I finally watched The Wire, and it was amazing." And I'm like, "Yeah, I told you 6 years ago that you should have watched it." But it's been really nice in the book community because I feel like a lot of our community has watched The Wire and really appreciate it because the themes and the way that it tells a story are way more like in line with literature, and like some of the authors that we all read, like Dennis Lahan and George Pelicanos and Richard Price, they all wrote on The Wire. Like Josh, for instance, likes a couple of those authors quite a bit. Yeah, here's so Josh says The Wire isn't my favorite show of all time, but it might be the best show of all time, and I could fully endorse that.
Well, then
Um,
I'm gonna have to look into
with
it. I don't even know anything about it. So
oh
maybe I should look
oh
into it.
okay, I have to sell you on it because I can also sell people listening. So The Wire is about the city of Baltimore, and specifically how it's called a wicked problem, where there's a problem, and if you pull one string, you can't actually get anything loose. And so it's demonstrating how that works in the complexes of a city, and it tells that story through the individuals within it. So each season of The Wire adds a different layer. So the first season, it's the cops and the drug dealers, and it shows how the police are corrupt, but also the institutions of the gangs form is also kind of like the police in a parallel. And so it builds up all of these characters in this. And then the second season introduces the dock workers and how they come in with white collar crime and with uh, bringing in drugs and how that affects things. And then the third season brings in the political landscape. So you get the mayor's office and like the city councilman and stuff. And then the fourth season introduces the schools and how people are being left behind in the schools that then they drop out, they become drug dealers or all these other things that happen. And then the fifth season brings in the media and the role that the media plays. And so each season builds on it to formulate this overall picture of Baltimore and the problems of an American city in the modern era. And it's endlessly watchable. Like every time you watch it, you realize just how complex individual things are that's going on in it. And I think I've seen it like 8 or 9 times, and every time I rewatch it, I'm like, oh, I never caught this detail before. And the guy who wrote it was a Baltimore journalist for like 20 years, and he teamed up with Ed Burns, who was a police officer in Baltimore and then a teacher in Baltimore, and they commit to realism in the show. So they will like actually film on location with us in Baltimore on the exact streets they're talking about, and they encourage all of the actors, who a lot of them are from Baltimore, that if anything didn't feel authentic, to speak up because they wanted authenticity above everything. And a lot of the characters in the show are like based on or amalgamated actual people who existed in Baltimore. It is it is incredible.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really interesting and intricate. I could see how you would pitch that to somebody who loves reading political fantasy. I mean, I know it's not fantasy, it's as real as you can get, but anything that involves like political machinations or that
Yeah,
intersection
and
and
in each season they bring
racial.
on writers that are usually the crime writers that know the type of stuff that they're dealing with, so they can commit more realism to it. And then yeah, it's basically like a novel on TV because each episode kind of builds the story. It doesn't have like a self-contained narrative, like it's serialized, but in the way that like each story you're just getting a little bit more, and then you get throughout the whole season you see the whole picture. And which is a pretty common way of doing TV now, but at the time it wasn't, and so it was a big ask at the time.
Yeah, because I would imagine that would be hard because you have to feel. I know a lot of writers in TV feel like they need to offer everything at once, get
Yeah.
the viewers hooked in right away. That would be challenging, especially at that time.
Yeah. We just had some friends over like a couple days ago. And so one of the people that was over is like one of my wife's best friends who I would have known now for maybe 12 years, like a long time. So, she gets there and she sits down. She's like, Kyle, I have big news for you. I'm like, okay, what? And she's like, I'm 5 episodes into The Wire. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I was so excited. And it's just so funny that she sat down and she's like, I know you're going to be really excited. It was like she was telling me some like, like we adopted a dog or something, but it's like, no, I started The Wire.
That's like me being like, excited because my husband's reading Stoner, which he finally
Oh,
read,
that's
but
exciting. Did
yeah.
he finish it or he just started it?
He did, yeah, yeah. I love hearing his thoughts on books because he's not part of our book community. He's not part of
Mhm.
any sort of wider book community, and he takes his time. Like, if he's gonna read a book, he's gonna read it so slowly, take in every single detail. So he always has thoughts on books that I don't hear anyone else talk about. So yeah, he brought up some really interesting points about that book that I can't really give away because of spoilers. But that and Piranesi he read last year. And he also had some really interesting thoughts about that book too. So yeah, that's been
Yeah.
fun. He's
I
not a
love
big
that.
reader,
That's
but yeah.
that's so like an undervalued thing because like my wife reads a lot, but she doesn't. Yeah, she's not in any book related stuff. Like she came on the channel this month for the first time, and it was like her first interaction with like talking to people about books beyond just like being like, hey, I read this book and it was good. And I've been over the years trying to coax her to talk about what she feels about books more because she's very thoughtful and she really like she catches things really well. Like when she read Way of Kings, she was picking up on all sorts of stuff that like most people don't pick up right away. Like because Brandon Sanderson, lays foreshadowing and stuff. But she was just like catching like all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, wow, you caught all that stuff like really early. But a lot of times she's not trained to like or like conscious about talking about stuff. So I'll be like, well, what did you think about this? And she's like, oh yeah, that was a good book. And I was like, well, like, what did you think? And then once I actually get her move, she actually like has a lot to say, and it has nothing to do with any of the talking points that we have. And so it's just very refreshing to talk to someone like that.
Exactly. Yeah, there's something really nice about that, really fresh about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you gonna get him to read Augustus next?
I doubt it. I don't think I'll succeed. He's been reading Lies of Locke Lamora now for the last few months. So it takes
Because he
forever.
reads slow or because he's not liking it?
I don't know. He says if I ask him, he'll be like, "Yeah, I like it." Like he's just not a very expressive person. Sorry, Justin, if you hear this. But yeah, he just takes he takes his time with things and it's not his number one pastime. So he just
Right.
picks up a book when he wants to. He's getting towards the end to it into the last 200 pages. So he's starting to enjoy it, I think. He's starting to enjoy it more. But he and I have different tastes in books slightly. So like for example, last year he tried with a Game of Thrones. He tried, and he did. He read the book, but it was so hard for him. He just kept putting it down, kept, like, groaning whenever he picked it up. He's like, "Ah, another betrayal." I'm like, "He's
Really?
telling
So
me
what is
this."
he? What is he like? Like what are some of his favorites?
Well, he's not a big fantasy reader, but he did
Right.
love Name of the Wind. So he picked up Name of
Oh,
the Wind
interesting.
several years ago and really loved it. Wasn't as crazy about Wise Man's Fear for the same reason that most of us aren't as crazy about Wise Man's Fear. And then he really enjoyed Farseer books 1 and 2, so Assassin's Apprentice and Royal
Is he an
Assassin.
Assassin's Quest hater like me?
He's not an Assassin's Quest hater, he actually well, he didn't read it. He just gave up.
Oh.
He was like he loved it, and I even saw him get emotional, and he's very introverted, and he's not very emotionally expressive all the time, but I actually saw him get tears in his eyes at the end of Royal Assassin, and I got so excited that he loved it. He read it before I did, by the way, but then and he had wonderful things to say about it. He kept saying, it's like a flower that just sort of blooms open as you read it," and I don't know, he just had all this praise
That's
for
so
it,
nice.
but then he never read on. He's like, "Eh, I'm done." He never wanted to read Assassin's
He he
Quest.
got he got his eyes teary and it scared him, so he's like, "I can't ever do this again."
Yes. And then he
Um,
heard that people were not as crazy about that book. There were that a lot of fans aren't as crazy about Assassin's Quest, and so he was like, "No, I'm not doing it." So, I don't
I
know.
mean, I like it's really hard to say. Like a lot of people do really like it. I was like Ryan, where
I
I'm
like
middle of
it.
the road. I don't like the end of Assassin's Quest, but I like there are some scenes in Assassin's Quest that are like all timers, but
Mhm.
not one of my favorite. Um, Robin Hobb
Yeah.
books.
I don't think it's my favorite either, but I did
Do you
love
know what your
Johanna.
favorite would be? Like, is it the last trilogy?
Oh, I've only read the first trilogy. That's another series I am
What?
sleeping
Really?
on.
How did I
Yes.
not know that?
I know. Well,
I
it's
thought
because
for sure
everybody.
no, I did know this because 'cause I'm always bothering you to read Live Ships,
Ah,
and you
because
haven't
'cause I'm
read
the
Live Ships.
worst, and the
Uh,
reason why, Kyle, is because I'm reading an 11-book series right now. So I'm reading Jenny Wirtz's Words of Light and Shadow, and that takes a
Joanna, I'm
lot
in
of
the middle of 32 series or something like that, and that's just series with published sequels. So,
oh gosh.
I feel like you should believe in yourself. I'm
I
gonna mail you
know.
a little sticker that just says "Believe in yourself."
I know, I know, and I mean, it's the reason I think I picked up so much shorter fiction in the beginning of the year because
Right.
that series is it's long and Wertz's style is very, very rich. It's very, very highfalutin, elevated prose, long, complex sentences, tons of prepositions per sentence. It takes time to read those books, so that's why I have not been able to
Yeah.
add more to my plate lately.
I've been collecting that series as I find it because I like visit a lot of like used bookstores and stuff. So I'll find like, older fantasy, especially mass market paperbacks for like $2, $3. So if I find it, I want to get it then as opposed to like trying to track it down when I need it. So I have like 6 or 7 of those books, but it does make me very nervous because I don't have a lot of confidence when I really like the series. I
Yeah.
want to, and read the first chapter of To Ride Hell's Chasm and really liked the prose and I like
Oh,
the prose
really?
in the Empire trilogy. But I hear that her densest prose is in Wars of Light and Shadow. So we'll
It
see how
is
that
more
goes.
dense in Words of Light and Shadow, but I'm actually really impressed that you enjoyed the beginning of To Ride Hell's Chasm. Because 'cause I'll be honest, when I started To Ride Hell's Chasm, within the first 90 pages or so, I was thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm so scared I'm gonna hate this book." I was so scared I was hating it because I could not adjust to the prose. I really struggled with the first 90 pages of that book, and then once I got past that mark, something switched in my brain, and I got hooked, and I love that book now. Now I would consider To Ride Hell's Chasm one of my favorite standalones of all time, but it was an adjustment. It was an adjustment, and yes,
Yeah, like
Words of Light
it
and
for
Shadow.
sure. I feel like there's like a poetry to the sentences. Like it took me a long time to read it, but I felt like it flowed really well. And also, how do you say this word on the screen right now?
Chasm. Somebody could double
I
check if
think
I'm wrong. Let me know
I
if I'm
think I
wrong in
said
the chat.
chasm, but I might just be wrong. Like I don't know how I said it. Now Ryan has me all like worried about how I said it, but I don't really
Chasm. Oh,
care.
I've been
But
saying it right. Yay. Yes, chasm.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I talk weird. My wife
Don't
makes
worry
fun of me
about
all
it.
the time for it.
I'm actually just happy for myself, Kyle, because I like Bookborn mispronounce everything all the time. Like there are several words that
You
people
you
use.
cannot you cannot pronounce things worse than Bookborn. Bookborn, I think, wakes up. I'm moderately convinced she doesn't know how to read. Like I think somebody reads stuff to her sometimes because I don't understand. She'll read like a regular word and then not say it right. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like,
She made me
and for
feel so
anybody
much better
listening,
about myself.
that is a joke. Bookborn's a good friend, but she just, it's a running joke that she can't talk. Um,
Yeah, that's fine. I can't talk either, but she's very numeric, so there you go.
yeah, good at math for sure. I
Good
still
at
need to read a
numbers.
song for R. Bengus. That's funny, Brian.
It's such a good book. It really is.
Yeah,
Malazan.
I really
Malazan.
wanted to finish like all the Guy Gabriel Kay books this year, and then instead of doing that, I read none. So
Oh, really?
I guess that'll be next year
There have been
because I
so
have like
many times when I've thought I could easily just throw away my TBR and just read Guy Gabriel Kay. I love his book so much, his style.
yeah, me too. And I kind of like I'm weird where I like to save books that I know that I'm really gonna like, which doesn't make any sense to me. And
No, I'm
that's
the
why
same
in
way.
May,
Ship of Magic. Yes, sorry.
yeah, you're gonna love Ship of Magic. What's wrong with us? Like,
I'm
why do
because
we?
I know I'm gonna love it, so I
I
feel like I'm
know,
saving
yeah.
it. Yeah.
I know. In May I did like a TBR where I read only books that I have been putting off reading because I know that I would like them, and that went very well. But the books that I didn't read on that list were Song for Our Bone and Fool's Fate, and I still haven't read them. So I don't know. I was like, I can't have too much good at once.
It's too much. Yes, I understand that totally. I there's a limit. That's the problem. Bookborn knows how to read, but she never read the words out
Oh,
loud. Is
but
that what you said?
she never read the words out loud. Yeah.
That's my
Um,
problem too. I mean, I think that that happens to us sometimes as readers. We'll come across a certain word that we read all the time, and then we don't think about it, and then we say it out loud, and turns out our internal narrator was completely off.
some things I just like refuse to change. Like I can't think of the example right now, but there's one where like I said it a certain way for years, and then I realized it was wrong, and I'm just like I'm not changing. Like I'm sticking to it. Um, but you
Yeah.
know, it is what it is. It's just funny how people get so mad. Like I made fun of Bookborn because we were doing like that video on A Song of Ice and Fire, and she just kept saying names wrong. She said Varys instead of Varys, and so I just gave her shit about it. And then people were like, "He's a pronunciation Nazi." I'm like, "Oh, I just
Aw.
I guess I am, but only to my friends."
Oh, and I have not gotten a chance to thank you in person for getting her to read A Song of Ice and Fire. So, congratulations on that. That's a huge
Well, it's
victory.
it is a victory for the rest of you, but it's not as much of a victory for me as you would think because now she won't read anything I recommend to her. She promised to read The Green Mile by Stephen King last June because I was like, "You never read anything that I recommend to you." She's like, "You're right. What's a book that you want me to read?" And I'll read it. I was like, "The Green Mile by Stephen King." I even sent it to her. And then, as a secret, she read A Song of Ice and Fire and loved it. And I was very, very happy. But this is one of those cursed gifts because now when I'm like, "You don't read the stuff, like you still haven't read The Green Mile, you haven't read Ship of Magic, blah, 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 blah." She's like, "I read A Song of Ice and Fire and I loved it. You should be happy." And I'm like, oh, going against your word. Everybody go to Bookborn's comments, which are always nice comments, and be mean. Say you should read The Green Mile. That's what you should say.
I was
Maybe she'll
actually
read it.
thinking of recommending to her, but I don't know if this would be the best recommendation for you, but I was actually thinking of recommending to her Clara and the Sun.
I
And
just bought
I
that the other
think
day.
have you read it?
No, I have
Okay.
I've had the audiobook for a while, but I like Kazuo Ishiguro quite a
Okay,
bit.
I would not recommend the audiobook for this one. I know his audiobooks are excellent. So I did have the audiobook when I read the book, but I didn't I read it visually and then I used the audiobook as almost like a reread of what I read sometimes. I didn't use the audiobook most of the time. I just mostly visually read it. And I noticed it made a difference because there was like a specific scene in this book that when I read it with my eyes, I got emotional. Like I got tears in my eyes. And I'm not saying that anybody else would get emotional over this. This might be just a very specific Joanna moment. But then I listened to the audiobook of that same scene and it wasn't emotional at all. And I thought, yeah, I don't feel like I think the audiobook narrator is excellent. Don't get me wrong. But I still feel like it could possibly hit a little bit more. I don't know. I think it
Yeah,
just
audio
the
is the
subtle
danger
notes
in that
are a
way
little stronger when you read it
because
visually.
yeah, just because like sometimes the audio narrator will be more like even like monotone's not the right, but like a deeper, like more chill tone of voice, and then like it doesn't really get the emotion uh coming out of it.
It
But then
was the
other times you have like
opposite.
Jonathan Keeble.
Yeah, and Jonathan Keeble's amazing. So it was kind of the opposite. It was that the character that the audiobook narrator was using, she was using a very specific kind of voice for that particular character, which worked for the character, but it still somehow took away from the emotion that the character that I felt was underneath the character dialogue. It's hard to explain. So I just felt
I
like
could
some of the subtlety got lost in the narration.
Interesting. Well, unfortunately, now that you've recommended me that book, I can't read it because you don't ever read the books that I recommend to you. So
What? That's not true. Paper Menagerie.
I had to reread that book. I had to con you into reading it with me. You're like, I like discussions. I don't
But
like
I did
trusting Kyle.
but I
You know
picked it
what
up
would
because of you.
demonstrate
I was
that is
in
true. Yeah,
I
I
was
remember.
in I was in Australia, and I was in the bookstore, and I Instagram storied like, "Oh,
Mhm.
look, they have the Paper Menagerie, but I'm not gonna pick it up here." And then Kyle's like, "You were wrong." He, like, went after me on Instagram about how wrong I was and how bad what a bad choice that was. So we went from Australia to Singapore. So when I was in Singapore, we went to another bookstore, and then I picked it up. And I was like, "Okay, Kyle, you win." And I bought it. What are you doing? Looking
You
at
know, I'm looking
Instagram?
up. I said my exact words to you were making mistakes in another hemisphere with a laughing face.
Oh, that's what it
And
was.
then
Yeah,
and then you said I actually went back and got it after. So
I
so
did.
I was not being mean. I was just making making fun of you a little.
I trusted you
But
on
no,
it, so
you
I did get it.
yeah, you did. And you know what? I'm really glad that you read that book because I knew that you would like it. And reading it with you was really nice because you had a lot of like interesting insights that I hadn't considered. And Evie was in there with us too. I don't know
Yes.
where Evie is in this chat, but yeah, we buddy read it with Evie and Bookborn, and it was a very good time. And that collection is very sad.
But the other thing, it is really sad. The other thing, that the reason I bring that up too, though, is because after finishing this book, I kept getting the feeling that if you're a fan of the Paper Menagerie, there's a good chance you could enjoy Clara and the Sun. I feel like they are
Oh,
kind of
interesting.
similar. Yeah, I think there's a really good comparison there. And I had that thought silently in my head, and then I talked to a friend who just read the Paper Menagerie and had read Clara and the Sun, and she said the same thing. She said, "I think people who like this, The Paper Menagerie, would really like Ishiguro." Actually, she hadn't read Clara and the Sun, but she thought Ishiguro would be a good comparison author. And so I was like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." But I do think Clara and the Sun
I don't
specifically.
know if I like really agree based on I obviously not with Claire and the Sun. I haven't read it, but like
Yeah.
in general, as them being comparison authors, it's not that I think if somebody read one, they would not like the other, but it doesn't make me think that they're more inclined to necessarily like the other one. Of the three books that I've read, maybe
Well,
Never Let Me Go.
yeah, well, and that's the thing is I know he has quite the range as an author, and I've
Right.
only read Clara and the Sun. The Clara and the Sun is more like sci-fi lit, if that makes sense. But the one difference I would say is I feel like in Paper Menagerie, Ken Liu is much more heavily exploring culture and themes related to culture and cultural identity, which you don't get in Clara and the Sun, but it still has a similar feeling. There's still that beautiful simplicity in the prose. It's just so melancholy. It's beautifully written, in my opinion. I hope you like it. I highly recommend it to you and Bookworm, actually,
Well, I
because
will
we
definitely
enjoyed
be
the book.
reading it,
Yeah.
and it'll probably be sooner rather than later because I just read A Pale View of Hills, which is his first book, and I don't think I liked it as much as the other two that I've read by him. But I thought he was really good at the character voice in that one. Like it was very different than the character voices that he'd done in the other two books. Because in Remains of the Day, it's like an older butler, like stifled guy, and then in Never Let Me Go, it's like a younger woman. And then in this one, it's like an older Japanese lady that is like telling. She's an unreliable narrator, and she's telling her life story to some of her family, and there's some stuff going on that she's not really mentioning. And I think all three voices were very, very distinctly different. So that makes me think that like while I didn't love A Pale View of Hills, it made me more impressed by his range generally. So I'm
Yes.
excited to read other stuff from him.
So that's beautiful. I saw your rating, by the way, for that, for A Pale View of Hills in the Discord today. So I'm glad that you talked about it and that it wasn't a total miss. But
This this is right off the press. Kevin is telling us some breaking news that Stephen King just tweeted out that he can't stop thinking about Midworld, which is the fourth or fifth time this month that he has tweeted about the Dark Tower related stuff.
hmm.
So we might be getting another Dark Tower book or something related to it.
Well, I would definitely check that out for
That's
sure.
exciting. He needs
Yeah.
to he needs to bring us back one more time.
Wow. That doesn't surprise me because I feel like he loves his own series so much. He loves his own books
Yeah.
so much,
Did you
which is
did
good.
you like the ending of the Dark Tower?
I liked it. I liked it. I did not love it like some
I
people
think I'm the
did.
same. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of it is because he showed so much innovation. He showed so much creativity throughout the series. So I was just expecting it to go a step further than it did. But I mean, it works for sure. And everybody says, "Well, it couldn't have ended any other way." I'm like, "Yeah, but
It could
he
have.
took so many risks. He took so
Yeah.
many risks in that series." So that's my one challenge with it. But I
Yeah.
was okay with it, you know?
Yeah, I don't like I definitely liked it. There was lots in like the second half of that series that I wish was different, but I it's unabashedly the craziest thing I've ever read. So it has that going for it. And I do just have to say to Evie's thing that Ishiguro is more literary than genre, while Liu is wholeheartedly genre. I do not agree with this.
Yes,
I think
I
Ken
agree
Liu
with
is
you.
quite literary. It's just
Mhm.
that this, like, I mean, what is literary and what is genre is marketing more than anything. And Ishiguro is someone who has um, taken the Margaret Atwood um, style of trying to distance themselves from genre. Like, so I think you could easily just call Ishiguro genre in, his genre books, and Ken Liu is the same way. It's just that Ken Liu does not shun that side of the marketing terms, I guess. So, but
Yes, I agree with you, Kyle, because actually that was why my friend made the comparison because I recommended to her the Paper Menagerie and she liked it, but she was also a little disappointed that it wasn't more hard sci-fi. And so she said that it felt more literary to her, I guess, or not. She didn't say literary, but she felt like it was more speculative, I guess, that a more broader umbrella term rather than specifically sci-fi. And so that's why she made the comparison, I think, between I think Never Let Me Go maybe and
right.
Paper Menagerie.
Remind me, you and Philip are buddy reading Dandelion Dynasty this year or next year?
I think we were planning to start this year, but I don't know if that I need to touch base with him because we're still
Hmm.
reading, like I said, Aspect Emperor. We have 2 big books there. We need to talk about book 6 in Wars of Light and Shadow, which we're gonna be doing this weekend. Uh, I don't know. It's possible we could be starting this year. I'll say that.
Nice. I'm excited. I think you're both gonna absolutely love it, but especially you. Like, I think you're gonna really, really enjoy it. And Josh says it'll be Holly Gibney ending up in Midworld, unfortunately. And in the words of Ricky Bobby, or in the words of that guy in Ricky Bobby, don't be go putting that evil on me.
We couldn't I don't know what that's from.
Oh, you've never seen that movie? Oh, it's
Mm-mm.
just a
Sorry.
reference to a movie. But basically, I'm saying don't don't wish that into happening, Josh, because that
Hmm.
will happen. Um, this makes sense, Evie. I get what you're trying to say now, and I
They're
totally
not
agree with you
the
there.
active honoring of the genre. I don't know if that's true. Um, I
In
don't know.
Ishiguro, I totally think so. Ishiguro's
Well,
trying to act like he's not genre as much as possible in
that's
order to
true.
get the normies.
Well, he's interesting. He's interesting because I fell down a rabbit hole watching some interviews with him last week, and he talked about how he finds he's not trying to fit a genre, but he's not trying to not fit a genre. So, I don't know. Yeah, it seems like he has some ambivalence
Yeah,
about
I mean, I've only
how it
seen one interview with him, and he seemed like a very interesting guy. Like, I don't really mean that as a wholehearted criticism, except that I don't like when anybody tries to castigate a section of what they're doing in order to like pretend they're too cool for it, which like is the vibe that I got. He's trying to
Oh,
not turn off people from being like, oh, this is sci-fi, because then people are like, I don't read sci-fi. Um, and there's other people like Emily St. John Mandel writes sci-fi, and then she gets slotted into literary for no reason besides that it sells better. And Margaret Atwood, I think, is the biggest um,
mhm.
problem in this particular area. Sorry, couldn't talk there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I love yeah. I'm one of the reasons I really wanted to read from Ishiguro though is because somebody had recommended Never Let Me Go about a year ago. And then from there, I started watching some videos on different parts of BookTube about Ishiguro. And I found some videos ranking his books. And what I found is that on a couple of different channels, there were ranking videos for all his books. And the people who were fans of his books all ranked them differently. They all had a different ranking order and they loved all his books, even the ones that they ranked least favorite. And that's how you know that you have an interesting author, that all
yes,
his
I
fans
agree.
have a different favorite. And I met 2 people in the town I live who are also huge fans, also have read his books, also have a totally different favorite from even the videos I saw. Both of them had different favorites. And I think it's also interesting that he doesn't he's very big about not wanting to confine himself when it comes to genre, but he
Hmm.
also likes to dabble in genre. So I don't think he would be opposed to saying his books have sci-fi elements, some of them, but one of them is more fantasy based. Other ones, like
Yeah,
you
the
said,
buried giant, right? Is the
yes, very
fantasy one?
giant. It's
Yeah.
more Arthurian fantasy. So I think
Yeah.
it's really cool that he's willing to try out different things and I don't know, to be more
No, I
experimental in that way.
I totally agree. I mean, I know it's a whole thing going on right now. That was one of the things I would say about Neil Gaiman going up until recently, where it's like the reason that you know that he's a great author, quotations needed, um, is that all of the people who read his books have a different favorite. Like there's not really a consensus, and he just like really is not. Um, he's not making the same hits. Like if you talk about George R. R. Martin, who is a great author, the majority of people are going to say Storm of Swords is the best, and there's a reason for that. But it is very interesting to get into an author where you're like, it either hits really hard or it doesn't hit at all, and he just takes chances with every book.
Yes. I agree. I just think that's something that says something special to me about an author. It makes
Hmm.
me really curious. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited to read more from him.
What are some like books that you want to read before the end of the year, like if you can?
So I definitely want to finish the Sarantine Mosaic. So I'll be reading Lord of Emperors later this month. I
Nice.
want to finish Aspect Emperor, so I have 2 more books to go from that series. I am also I have this on my TBR. I got in trouble with Alan for it, but I would like to read Meditations
I like
by
Meditations.
Marcus
Don't
Aurelius.
tell Alan. Don't tell Alan. But Meditations is a good book.
Hopefully he's not hearing that.
He doesn't watch Booktube anymore. He has a kid to get mad at.
That's true.
um, so
Yeah.
I don't now I do agree with Alan's criticisms of it, which is that it was just a diary that he had and it got like published after, and that you have all these dude bros that are like, "Would you meditation?" Like the conversation around meditations drives me absolutely nuts, and I'm seldom less interested in having a conversation with someone when they're like, "Have you ever read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius?" I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be an annoying conversation." But the book itself, I did really like.
I think I might potentially like it.
You'll
That's my
probably like it.
inclination. That's my feeling about it. So I wanna give it a shot, but everybody says if you read it, don't read it in one go. How would you recommend that too, to just take your time through it? How would you recommend going about
Um,
reading it?
I really just think it depends on how it's sitting with you. Like in general, I think philosophy is probably better to read slower. But I know
Mm.
plenty of people that that's not the case with. Like, I mean, I'm sure if you ask Jared Henderson how he reads philosophy, he probably reads a lot of philosophy at once and then thinks about it. I haven't heard him say that. That just seems like with the amount that he reads, it's probably true. But I do think there is a lot of value in reading like 10 or 15 pages of some philosophy and then like really sitting with it for a day or however long, and then reading some more or just reading it slowly at your own pace. Meditations is a little different because like it wasn't intent he wasn't writing a book for the public. And because of that,
Mm.
it really just depends on how much you're taking from each individual like if I think about The Art of War, which is a book I've read way more, you can read The Art of War in one sitting and it'll take you 35 minutes. It's very short. But it's also valuable with The Art of War to read like 2 pages of it and then kind of think about because like it's very obvious. It'll be like, it'll say some stuff like, when you want to attack, think about it for a second, and you're like, great, Sun Tzu, thank you so much for telling me. But then like that wasn't a real quote. I'm just making a joke.
Yeah.
But then if you actually sit with what he's trying to say and how that like blends into like the deeper element, you can really grab a lot out of that line, and that's why the book has lasted so long because there's all this hidden depth. And so going slow with meditations might really work for you, and might help explain why Alan didn't like it as much because Alan probably was like, I'm not sitting with this stupid philosophy crap.
Yeah, that's probably true, and I know that Jared Henderson is gonna be on BellTube's channel tomorrow,
Yes, he
so maybe
is.
we can ask him, Brian, maybe we could ask him,
Yeah,
if I
that'd be a good
remember, I'll
question
drop
for
that
him.
question in the chat of, like, how do you recommend going about a reading of Meditations for the first time? So, that'd be cool to get his opinion
Yeah,
about that, but
Jared Henderson is funny in the sense that like I didn't watch any of his stuff for a long time because I'm just like so burnt out on philosophy dude bros. And without knowing anything about him, I was just like, this is a guy that likes philosophy on the internet. He's gonna be a philosophy dude bro. I don't want to listen to him. And then I watched like 15 minutes of him on Chatting with Nuts, and I was instantly like, oh, this guy's legit. He's very nice, very smart, and just like a good dude. And then now I've watched a bunch of his videos, and I'm like, oh, Jared Henderson's awesome. But it's hard. It's very hard for me to overcome that like philosophy dude bro dislike. I've realized.
I, immediately liked Jared's channel, and I discovered his channel, I wanna say when he wasn't very big. It seemed like he only had a few videos out at the time I found him, but I immediately gravitated to what he was talking about because he was talking about why we read and
Mhm.
about not like, how to read, like, how to take in the reading experience. He made a lot of videos like that when he started his
Yes, and
channel.
those are some of his best ones. I really like those.
Mhm. And that was before I started the Why Read series, like, right before. but I thought, "This is exactly what I wanna do. This is exactly what I
Well,
wanna
you guys
focus
heard it
on."
here first, folks. Joanna stealing from Jared Henderson. Exclusive. You'll be
Well,
hearing from Jared's lawyers.
yeah. I mean, well, it wasn't really stealing from Jared, but I think the algorithm pointed me in Jared's direction because I was doing a search on slow reading. And the reason I did that is because at the time, I felt like it was clickbait for me anytime I saw videos, and there are so many, by the way, how to read more books, how to make time to read more books, how to read quickly. There are so many books or so many videos like that because I am a slow reader and it's a struggle for me how slowly I read, especially in comparison to you. I know that you and Jake are super, super fast naturally. I'm very
Yeah,
slow. And so I was watching those videos and it made me hate myself more because I felt like I can try all this stuff and it doesn't work for me. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to speed up my reading, and I can only do it very marginally and for a very short amount of time. But for the most part, I am a slow reader compared to most people. And so I started to dig into what about videos about how to read slowly? What about videos about taking in the experience and taking time with it? And then it started pointing me towards Jared's videos because he was kind of countering that
right.
cultural message or toxic productivity message, even prevalent on BookTube. So, yeah, that's how I found out about his videos. And yeah, I would say that it was part of the inspiration for the Why Read series coming about.
You know, because I read a lot of books, people probably, oh, they're not probably, they have told me that they assume that I just like value fast reading. But it makes me sad that you felt stupid or like bad about yourself that you were reading slow. I don't think there's anything wrong with reading slow. There's a lot of benefits to it. And then also like I don't read fast because I'm like, I'm gonna sit down and be like, I want to read fast. I just naturally my brain
Yeah.
processes the word fast.
Oh, and I'm
So
not
your
judging you for
brain
that.
no,
Yeah.
no, I know. But what I was gonna say is that like when you sit down and read, or anybody who reads slower, and your brain is processing that slower, that does not make you stupid or like a poor reader. It's like your brain processes the way that it processes, and who knows why it's doing that. And I would argue that if we could somehow like peel back the layers, the the narrative overall that like people need to read faster, and seeing all those videos of like how to read faster, all that stuff is giving people stress when they're reading. So you're thinking about all these things ahead of time about like how I should be reading faster, and you're trying all these strategies. Not you, even just like you specifically, Joanna, but people that have tried this. And then that's going to release a rush of cortisol through your body, and then that is going to make it way harder for you to focus on what you're reading. So then you're not going to retain as much what you read, and you're going to read slower. So it's almost like this perpetual thing where it's the whole idea of the problem is making the problem worse. So I'm really glad that you found Jared and that you have realized that there's tons of value in slow reading, and it just makes me feel bad that people see people that read fast, or like people make videos about how to read faster, and they're like, oh, I don't do that, so therefore what I read is not as valuable, or is not as well done. And I just think that's completely ridiculous, because when you talk about books, you pull so much more out of it than most people do. And you can talk about it so eloquently, and then you second guess yourself about like, oh, maybe I don't remember this thing, or maybe I misunderstood it, or something. And it's like, no, no, trust yourself. Like, trust what you're thinking about a book, because it's valuable too. And that is my soapbox for the night.
Aw, thank you, Kyle. You made me feel so much better. It has been an inferiority complex issue for me for many years, even since I was a kid. Because even as a kid, and actually, I can even remember instances of in high school and middle school where you did silent group reading as a class, where you had to read a section of text, and then when you're done, go ahead and look up. So I remember a couple of times when we were silently reading as a class, and then I'd finish reading and I'd look up and everybody was looking at me because I was the last person reading. And I thought, oh no, I'm kind of weird. So
Those kind
yeah,
of
it's
things
always been something that's
really stay with you. Yeah.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
I was a kid, so I grew up on a carnival. I don't know, like, did you know that?
I wait, yes, I did. Yes, I
Okay.
did, but I'd
Yeah,
forgotten.
so
Talk about
that's
it.
okay. I just usually if people don't know that, they take a minute to be like, "What?" So that's why I wanted to make sure you knew. So yeah, I grew up on a carnival. So I moved around a lot. So I went to a bunch of different schools growing up. And so each year, sometimes multiple times in a year, I'd have different teachers that would give me parent teacher conferences. So I'd always be in the room, and my parents would be there, and they would always have some form of comment. It would always take the form of, considering Kyle's upbringing, he's doing really well.
Oh
Or,
gosh.
considering where Kyle spends most of his time, he's like excelling in class. It was always this qualification of because I hang out with the carnies that don't have teeth or whatever they think is going on, that I therefore am like doing well because of that, like in comparison to that. But I would be like, I have A's in this class. Like I'm doing well generally. But it's
Yeah.
always created this thing in me where it's like, oh, I'm not as smart as other people. It's like in considering, so like it's just these little things from childhood that really like get in us. And even if we can like intellectualize out of them, they're just like baked into our consciousness. And it sucks, man, for sure.
Yes. Oh, that's awful. I can't believe the teacher framed it that way. I could understand how that would be processed in your mind and make you rethink yourself or doubt yourself. Absolutely, though. It's crazy how much that stuff affects you as a child growing
Yeah.
up. Mhm.
But that's adulthood, is just trying to detangle all those webs and try to make ourselves whole again, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Switching topics a little off the deep traumas of our childhood. Are you
Yeah.
are you going to go to Worldcon next year? I feel like you should come. There's going to be a bunch
I
of us.
want to. I was trying to catch up on your discussion with Sarah that you had a couple of days ago. Hooray for
Hmm.
Sarah Reeds being on Kyle's
Yeah.
Corner. And that you said that it's gonna be in Seattle next year. Is that
Yes,
right?
Seattle. Yes. Like
Yeah.
I think it's the first week of August. It might be the second week, but I know
Oh,
Jimmy said he wants to go, and
yeah.
Bookborn lives in the area. Jake told me the other day that he might come down because he's close. So and I'm sure there's a lot of other people that I don't have off the top of my head. I know Patrick said he was going to try to come. I think that's visa related. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be really, really fun.
Oh, I
And
wanna
because
go
it's not
so bad.
Brandon Sanderson specific, I think we'll be able to attract a lot more people. Like Dragonsteel was like, it's going to be a nice meetup. There's going to be a lot of us. We're going to have a lot of fun. But if the non Sanderson fans just don't really want to go to that, but Worldcon, it's like there's something for all of the fantasy fans. So
Yes. Well, if it works out, if it's not, yeah, it depends on the dates in August, but
for
I will
sure,
do my best because I know that's very rare that's in the States. I've never been I don't think I've ever been no, I've never been to Seattle. I've been to Washington, but I've never been to Seattle.
I've never been
That
to
would be
Seattle
fun.
or Washington, and I really want to go to Seattle. So
Yes.
that will be fun. Also, Jake, this is a very funny comment. He said, "I'm sorry for what I've said for someone named Kyle. You're a good person. Even when compared to not Kyles, you are cool because there's all these Kyles that are bad people." And so, thank
Like
you,
the
Jake.
one
I
in
appreciate that.
the Elderlings that I keep hearing about. Yeah.
I was talking about this the other day with Bookborn. There's also a villain named Kyle in a Brandon Sanderson book. In the third Legion novella,
Oh,
the
okay.
villain in that is Kyle. And I'm like, what is with all my favorite authors only using my name for villainry? Like, I don't know if that's fair.
Yeah, that's a good point. For sure. Yeah.
So we're
What
gonna wrap
about
up.
you? What are you gonna read for the rest of the year? What's on your, reading plans for the rest
Oh,
of
I
the year?
don't know. I really want to finish Realm of the Elderlings before Dragonsteel so that I can be fully equipped for that.
When is that? What is Dragonsteel?
Dragonsteel's first week of December, or I guess first weekend of December, like the 4th to the 7th.
Okay.
And Robin Hobb will be there, and your favorite author, Fonda Lee. And
I don't
I'm
have
gonna
anything against her, I just didn't
I'm gonna
connect
walk
the
up to Fonda Lee and I'm gonna be like, Joanna reads, hates you.
Oh, hate her.
But yeah, so I really want to have finished Realm of the Elderlings by December. I think I can power through on audio for Rain Wilds and then read the other ones. So I think I can get that done. I want to read at least a couple Michael J. Sullivan books before then because he's also coming to Dragonsteel and I've only read one of his books. I want to finish the Dungeon Crawler Carl series
It's a tongue
because I
twister.
was really liking that, and I haven't read it in a while. I want to finish the first trilogy of the Second Apocalypse, the Prince of Nothing, and I want to have read at least up to the Bone Hunters in Malazan, the next two
Mm,
Malazan books. So
yes.
we will see how that goes, and I want to finish all of Sanderson's books. So I only have three left, which is the Reckoners YA trilogy. So I would say those are like the highest books on my TBR and Song for a Bone.
Nice, you could do it. I think you could do it.
Yeah,
I
I
will
think I
say
can
with
too. I just
the
gotta
Prince of
focus.
Nothing with the Prince of Nothing trilogy, I'll just go ahead and share with you, book 2 is my favorite in that trilogy. Book
Nice.
3 book 3 I did enjoy, but I also think if I didn't know there was another secondary series after that, I don't think I would be satisfied with that book.
Ah,
Um,
the Assassin's
I don't
Quest
think it's the
problem.
best.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it's the best in the trilogy by far. I think that
Interesting.
book 1 and 2 are a little bit
I
above
think
it.
that 2 is pretty commonly the favorite, so I'm
Mhm.
excited to dive into book 2 and see how I feel about that. Um, it's really hard to get copies of the 2nd series. Like,
Yes, it is hard.
I only have, the White Luck Warrior, that's the only one I have physically for that one,
Oh, no.
so I have to
Yeah.
track down some of those.
Yeah, I would say, I've only read 2 books in the 2nd series, but I think they're far above anything in the 1st trilogy. Like, he steps
Yeah,
up
that's what
his
I'm
game.
hearing.
He gets better and better as a writer.
Yeah, there's so many, like, things where I, um, I read the 1st book of it, and I'm like, "Oh, people say that it gets better." And then I'm, like, a little hesitant as to whether or not that's gonna happen, but, like, everybody who reads the 2nd series that I don't think I've seen anybody read the 2nd series and not say it's, like, head and shoulders above the 1st trilogy or the 1st series, so that'll be
Yeah, I
nice.
was nervous because I did love the 1st trilogy, but now looking back, I'm like, "No, it's not nearly as good," and that's shocking to me. Like, that blows my mind that I can
I
think
feel that
that.
way about, Empire of Silence because I really liked Empire of Silence, and then, like, in hindsight, after reading the rest of Sun Eater, I'm like, Empire of Silence is just, like, fine. Like, I mean,
Oh,
it's not
wow.
fine, like,
Yeah.
it's really good, but, like, in comparison to how much I like all the other books in the series, I'm like, "Oh, yeah," like, when people, like, tell me they don't really they're like, "Oh, yeah, like, Empire of Silence, I gave, like, 3 stars, like, it's just kinda fine." I'm like, "Yeah, like, that's fair." But when I read it the first time, I was like, "Wow, like, Empire of Silence is so good." So it is interesting how, like, more perspective makes you, like, retroactively think not less, because I still think the book is good, but it doesn't hold as high of esteem to me now.
And remind me, have you read Book of the New Sun?
I have not yet.
Okay. Yeah. That's the one hesitation I have with getting into Sun Eater is because I know that so many people
Sunseeder.
Sunseeder is because I know that so many people have said that it's largely influenced by Book of the New Sun, and so part of me wants to read Book of the New Sun first, just to
Yeah, I
see.
remember you saying that. I think we have different philosophies on that just because,
I don't think you have to, but I kinda
no,
just
no, no,
I
for sure.
like
I
to.
understand, and that's just like a choice as to what someone would do. But I would almost think the opposite, where like I know some people have enjoyed Sun Eater less because they notice all the allusions to Book of the New Sun. So I would almost want to experience Sun Eater blind and then go back and appreciate Book of the New Sun first, because I'd be more worried about it ruining Sun Eater for me. But
That's true.
yeah,
I think that's
it's totally
possible.
valid to be able to like want to read Sun Eater and catch all the references. So just
Yeah.
depends on how you want to do things.
Yeah, I guess I could see that too. So, I don't know. I'm curious. How have you caught up on that series or
On
on Sun
Sunday,
Eater?
yeah, I've
Yeah,
caught up.
you're caught up? Okay.
Yeah, the whole series is great in my opinion. I do think I have a certain affinity for the middle of the series. Like I think Howling Dark, Demon and White is kind of the peak for me. But a lot of people really liked the newest book. Like it's one of the most popular, and it's either a favorite or a second favorite for most of the fandom. There's an element of the series that has gotten a little bit more on the nose for me that pulled me out of the 6th book a little bit. So that's why it's not quite like a favorite of the series to me, but I still think like I mean his writing gets better each time. Some of the plot stuff isn't just incredible in that book. Just
Mhm.
like a little bit of stuff that didn't quite work for me.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. And it might not be something that bothers you. There is stuff that doesn't bother everybody. It's just for me personally and my upbringing, it's something that I chafe against and it's getting a little more obvious for me. So
Yeah, I just have no idea where I'm gonna land about it. I know you said you loved book 1 the first time or that you loved it, but in retrospect, it might not have been as strong. I'm thinking if I read the series, I wanna at least read up to book 2 if I'm not crazy
I
about book 1.
yeah, I think that's what I recommend to people. Unless you like hate like there are people who would read the first book and they'd be like, I hate X, Y, and Z about it. I'm like, okay, like don't bother continuing. But if you like Empire of Silence at all, I think reading Howling Dark is worthwhile because the most basic reason that Howling Dark is better is that Christopher Rocchio started outlining with every book after the first book. The first book he didn't outline, and you can
Oh,
really tell because it kind of just like he goes here and then he goes here and then he goes here and then like it feels disjunctured, and then in the second book, it feels way more intentional because he used an outline. So even that just makes the book head and shoulders more linear for people. But I also just think basically every element in Howling Dark is better and more clear than in Empire Silence. So you have a better idea of what you're going to feel about the series with Howling Dark.
That's good to know. Yes. And man, there's so many sci-fi books, like I said, but it is
Yeah.
one that I do intend to read
Um,
at some point. If
Speaking
I
of, I'm getting
do,
ready to turn into a pumpkin. So I'll share this with you guys. I started to tell Joanna about this before we started, which is so my wife and I are watching Dark, and we're getting really into it. And she was like, "How long is your live stream going to be? Because I really want to watch more before bed." And I was like, "Well, it probably won't be that long because Joanna likes to turn into a pumpkin before bed." And then so she laughed. And so the reason I said turn into a pumpkin is because a while ago I had to ask you guys what this meant because I had no idea what turn into a pumpkin meant. And you and Evie say it. So I told my wife, I was like, yeah, I didn't know what that meant. And they had to tell me. And she's like, how did you know what that means? It's from Cinderella. And I was like, well, I guess my Cinderella lore is
that's
just not
right.
up to date. But it is funny that she obviously knew exactly what you guys were
Yes,
talking
that's so
about.
funny. Yeah, we both use that phrase, and I think Bookborn uses
Oh
that phrase
my
as
God,
well.
look at this. So much treachery in one place. We were just talking about how meditation is the best book of all time by the
That's
best
just for
emperor of
you,
all time.
Alan. Hey, Alan.
Well, I don't want you to turn into a pumpkin, Joanna. So I will let you go. But before that's a bad take. But before we go, I did want to say one thing, which is I've watched your videos for a long time. I feel like we're good friends. I feel like I understand your tastes, and I think you should read the unabridged version of The Stand.
For
and,
those of you who
and
don't know, Library Ladder and Read by Kyle both got into a quite a long-winded argument in
yeah,
my
yeah,
Discord
it was
about
perfectly
whether to
cordial,
read.
perfectly cordial. We just had a minor
It was, it
disagreement
was. It
about
was
The
very
Stand.
cordial,
Yeah.
yes. It was a very
Hey,
gentlemanly argument.
well, it was funny because I said like I don't remember what I said exactly, but I was like, "Oh, just like long messages sometimes come off combative." So I just want to let you know that like thanks for having this discussion with me or whatever, because I was worried about my messages being really long and appearing combative. And then he went and he was like, "Just so you know, I'm always long-winded. I don't mean to come off combative." Like, no, I was saying that I didn't want to. So it was perfectly fine. But the Library Ladder thinks that people should read the abridged original version of The Stand because it suffers pacing problems in the unabridged that came out later. And while I agree, the unabridged is much longer, I think that you really value thematic depth and character exploration and even world building, which I think the second one gets quite a lot more out of. So I think that you will really enjoy the unabridged, and I hope you listen to me.
Well, I will listen to you because it's really hard to find an abridged version anyway. But yes, I
See,
will
even
listen.
even Alan agrees.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. Okay, good.
Um,
Thanks for weighing in
and
on that,
and
Alan.
And Jake, Turn Into a Pumpkin is like at midnight, all of her stuff turns into a pumpkin in Cinderella, I guess. So, yeah, I think it's her carriage. Yeah,
Her
that's
carriage
what I
turns into
thought
a
too.
pumpkin. Yes, at midnight.
But yeah, so we have all these people referencing Cinderella, and I don't know what it means until recently. But but yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Joanna. It was great to talk to you one on one and pick your brain about so many topics and talk to you about some series and stuff. And we'll do this again for sure. And read The Stand unabridged.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody in the
And
chat.
yeah, chat. Thanks so much for being so lively once again. You guys are always fantastic. And we'll see you guys next time. The next episode of Kyle's Corner is going to be in 2 weeks, and it's going to be a really special one. I put a lot of time into getting this schedule. It will be Ken Liu and Adrian Tchaikovsky together, and I'm really excited to pick their brains. So I will be posting the chat, the thumbnail, and stuff for that soon. And I hope you guys can join. I think it's next Friday. So bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.